Celebrated atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell once said in his essay, "Why I'm Not a Christian," historically, it is quite doubtful whether Christ even existed at all, and if he did, we know nothing about him. Thomas Paine, the author of The Age of Reason, predicted that the Bible would be out of print within 50 years of his death. Paine said this of Jesus: "There is no history written at the time when Jesus Christ is said to have lived that speaks of the existence of such a person." The validity of Christianity rests upon whether the man, Jesus Christ, really did exist. The views of Thomas Paine and Bertrand Russell are still popular today out on the streets. Those who deny the existence of Jesus all believe one thing: the Bible must be unreliable. But is that true? In a court of law, the testimony of eyewitnesses is extremely important in establishing the truth of a matter. What we have in the Gospels is exactly that. Eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus coming to us from the 1st century AD. Far from being a hodgepodge of mystical make-believe, these documents of the New Testament attempt to tell us history as it happened. For example, the book of Acts, written by Luke, was found by Colin Heemer, the historian, to be accurate in nearly 100 claims concerning the whereabouts of old cities and authorities and rulers. This has been corroborated by many other historians of antiquity. It's a very common belief that people think that the Bible, and the New Testament in particular, was written hundreds of years after Jesus actually walked the earth. But this is not true. The Gospels come very quickly after Jesus' death and resurrection, and they were widely circulated. We have over 5,000 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament documents and a further 19,000 manuscripts in other languages. We only have around 650 manuscript copies of Homer's Iliad, and that's the next closest to the New Testament in terms of copies. So what? Well, that means that we can check these manuscripts, all 25,000 of them, for any differences or errors. We can see whether the text was changed over time. But in fact, what we find is, rather than the New Testament manuscripts changing over time, they are 99.9% the same right across the board. The majority of the differences between the manuscripts are simply down to spellings and slips of the pen. Even if people do want to keep persisting with this idea that the Bible is not a historical book, we can still point to 35 extra biblical sources for the life of Jesus, which come to us within 150 years of his death. In fact, there are 11 non-Christian sources from the ancient world that mention Jesus, including Suetonius, Tacitus, Hadrian, Pliny, Josephus, to name a few. Bart Ehrman, the New Testament scholar and atheist, has this to say about those who deny that Jesus even existed. This is not even an issue for scholars of antiquity. The reason for thinking Jesus existed is because he is abundantly attested in early sources. If you want to go where the evidence goes, I think that atheists have done themselves a disservice by jumping on the bandwagon of mythicism, because frankly it makes you look foolish to the outside world. If that's what you're going to believe, you just look foolish. Paul Mayer, former professor of ancient history, writes, "The total evidence is so overpowering, so absolute, that only the shallowest of intellects would dare to deny Jesus' existence." So when we talk about Jesus, we are not talking about a figment of our imagination. We're not talking about a religious construct. We're talking about a real man who walked the earth, who interacted with history, and whom we can know about from the Bible, historical 1st century documents that come down to us with an extraordinary degree of accuracy. Jesus of Nazareth certainly existed, and he certainly did the things that the Bible claims he did. The question is, do you believe what the Bible says about Jesus?